We, sons of Gruni, may have drunk deep from the bitter waters of misfortune, but we yet survive. Whilst a single dwarf draws breath, we will fight the evils that assail us, and we will never ever give up.
So welcome guys to my next faction guide, this time with the dwarves. So first of all, thank you for all the kind words in my last faction guide and also for your suggestions, but as I said, I would prefer to do faction guides about factions that already have the regiments of renown, so let's continue with the Dawi over here. So in this faction guide we will start again with the strengths and the weaknesses of the Dawi in general. After that we take a closer or detailed look on the complete army roster. And then I will show you some gameplay footage from my side. We'll talk about the tactics. And yeah, I think this will be quite interesting. So I would say I played several thousand ladder games overall and several hundred just with the Dawi. So I love playing this faction in a competitive sense. In my opinion, the Dawi were always a much underrated faction. Of course they have their weaknesses, but they have also a lot of strength. So let's start with this. So let's begin with the advantages or the strengths. So the most important point is that the Dawi are a very elite faction. So nearly every unit is a high tier unit or very elite. There are nearly no low tier units available, and this is a quite interesting fact. But a much more interesting fact is that you are still able to bring your units in large numbers. And that is really a unique characteristic of the Dawi. So if you take a look on another very elite faction like the High Elves, you can see that you are not able to do this. You have elite units, but you are not able to bring them in large numbers. Dawi units have typically a huge amount of armor, the most of them causing a huge amount of armor piercing damage, and they have in average a very high leadership. So if we take a look on the infantry roster, we can find the miners, the cheapest unit available, and I mean, give me a break. They're causing armor piercing damage, have a huge amount of armor, and they are really payable. And this is exactly what I mean. There is not really a low tier unit available, everything quite elite, everything quite cost efficient, even the cheapest units. Another really important point is the artillery. Of course there are other factions with a strong artillery like Empire or the Skaven, but the Dawi artillery is really strong and is really important for the Dawi because of the lack of mobility. So another really important point in my opinion are the runes. The runes of the Rune Lord, the runes of the Runesmith are really strong abilities. They provide support for their own troops and damage resistance, leadership buff, and they can make really a difference in a match. So they are really an important characteristic, important abilities, and in my opinion a very important point for the Dawi overall. Another really important point and a really unique characteristic is that all Dawi units have naturally a resistance to magic of 25%. And as I said, this is naturally, so you don't have to pay for it, and yeah, this is a quite strong characteristic. But also here, there is light, there is shadow, so let's talk about the cons. A huge disadvantage is that the Dawi have no access to magic. So not one single spellcaster. So nothing more to say about that. Therefore, as I said before, the Dawi have a natural resistance to magic. Another point is that the Dawi have nearly no mobility, except for the gyrocopters, so no cavalry units whatsoever, and this is a big disadvantage, or in my opinion the biggest disadvantage, because yeah, you have to always react instead of acting, and so the Dawi are a very defensive faction, so it's not so easy to deal with different other factions because of the lack of mobility. So for example, the Dawi are really weak to chariots, because they have their only tool to destroy the chariots in the pre-combat is gyrocopters or artillery, and this is a problem because there is no cavalry to defend the infantry troops, and this is a big disadvantage of all. The next disadvantage is quite similar to the disadvantage before, but it's worth to be mentioned. The Dawi lords have no mounts, except of course for Torgrim Grudgebearer and the Rune Lord with his Anvil of Doom, but overall these mounts are also not for mobility purposes, it's just for make them more steady, and this is also the problem on other lords. They have overall quite good melee stats, the complete lord roster, but the lords without a mount available are very squishy, because they will fly away if they get hit from larger units, and in some cases it can really be a disadvantage because of the missing mass. So the next disadvantage is that the Dawi have no access to monsters, so just they have the arms of service are quite small, so they have just infantry, their lords, their heroes, and artillery and some missile infantry of course, but as I said, cavalry is missing, monsters are missing, so overall there are some important arms of service that the Dawi have no access to. But even though the Dawi are able to get a relatively good variation in their builds, because they have a good amount of units or a good quantity of different units available on the infantry or missile infantry roster, so overall they are quite well stocked. Though that's everything from the strengths and the weaknesses, let's go to the units, let's take a look on the complete roster, and directly after that we are talking about tactics and with some gameplay footage. So thank you, and let's go. So let's begin with the Lord, the cheapest Lord from the Dawi. He's armored and shielded, he's a melee expert, and he has charge defense against all. He's very heavily armored. Typically for all Dawi units we have an amount of armor 120, and this is a lot of stuff for the cheapest Lord. He has a bronze shield, the weapon strength is 420, not the highest. The armor piercing amount is also not the highest, but overall these stats are quite decent for that price, so you can deploy the Lord without anything for 1000 credits, and these stats are quite for that price quite good. But also the other Lords are not so expensive on the roster, so it's in the most cases not worth to bring the Lord because of the savings. So let's come to the most competitive Lord from the Dawi, the Rune Lord. And the Rune Lord is the most competitive Lord because he has access to his runes. And also his stats overall are quite decent, so he's very well armored, and typically for Dawi units as I said, but his amount of armor is 120, and this is a lot of stuff. His melee stats are also very good, so we have 40 melee attack and 45 melee defense. This is quite good. The weapon strength is quite low therefore, so we have just 340, and the amount of armor piercing damage is 100, what is also quite low. But as I said, he has access to all these runes, to this Master Rune of Odin's Steel, so you can buff your allied troops with plus 60 armor. The Master Rune of Rough and Ruin, you can damage combatants, and with the Master Rune of Negation you can buff your units with plus 44% damage resistance, and also he has this Master Rune of Grungni, so plus 20% missile resistance. So this is a lot of stuff. This is not a joke. This can decide on victory or defeat, and also you can set him on a Anvil of Doom, so you get a little bit more melee defense, more hit points, but the most important point over here is with his mount, that he's more steady. And this is also a quite important fact. As I said before, other non-mounted lords have some trouble to get engaged in a fight against large entities because they are more squishy, they will fly around, even if their stats are overall better than the stats of the Rune Lord. The Rune Lord is more steady on his Anvil of Doom. So let's come to Belagar Ironhammer, and Belagar Ironhammer is in my opinion the most popular lord on the Dawi roster. Not in a competitive sense, but when it comes to popularity, I think the most player would decide to play with Belagar. And yeah, Belagar overall is very heavily armored, so also here 120 armor, and this is a lot of stuff. He has a silver shield, quite interesting. The melee stats are very good. Melee attack is 60, melee defense is 55. The weapon strength is also very good, 450. A little bit of disadvantage is that he has not so good AP value, so he has just a amount of armor piercing damage of 160. This is okay, but not so high, not so much. So Belagar is a melee expert, as I said. He's armored and shielded, and he has a charge defense against all. Overall, I would say for this performance, Belagar has a quite decent price, and if you don't need too much armor piercing damage, then you can pick Belagar. Yeah, nothing more to say about that. So let's continue with Ungrim Iron Fist. And Ungrim has very good AP value, so we have an armor piercing damage of 285, and this is a lot of stuff, nearly 300. Ungrim is a, you can say a specialist for large entities, so he has a bonus versus large of 35, and he has also charge defense against large foes. His weapon strength is overall quite good. His melee attack is very good, so we have 70. The melee defense is quite low, just 35, so for a lord this is not high. But the amount of armor also here, 120. This is a lot of stuff. It's also not possible to sit him on a mount or whatsoever, but he has a quite good activated ability called Axe of Dargo. With Axe of Dargo you will get a buff on the armor piercing damage, so plus 40% armor piercing damage, and then in addition to that plus 32 bonus versus large. So as I said, he already has a bonus versus large, and this is then a lot of stuff. Of course the duration is not very long, so it lasts just 32 seconds, but overall this is a quite good activated ability in my opinion. So overall I would say Ungrim Iron Fist is a decent pick when it comes to fight against large entities. For this price, that is okay. So let's come to Grombrindal, the White Dwarf. He's also very well armored, so armor amount of 120. He causing magical attacks. This is quite interesting. Also the melee attack very high, 70 over here. The melee defense 40, okay. The weapon strength is 500, and this is a lot of stuff, so 500. The amount of armor piercing is 315. So overall the lord with the best combat stats on the roster. So he has no bonus whatsoever, but he's a really around unit because he's causing, as I said, magical attacks, has a huge amount of armor piercing damage, the weapon strength is high, the melee attack is high, the armor is high. So overall, a battle machine, and yeah, nothing more to say about that. He's a little bit more expensive, nearly 1,900 credits. There's a lot of stuff. But he has also quite good abilities. For example, Flash Bomb reduces the speed around himself of 76%, and this is a lot of stuff. And also the melee defense of 27. And then he has his Rune Axe of Grombrindal, plus 40% armor piercing damage. So summing all together, Grombrindal is quite expensive, I would say, even if his stats are supreme. Because you don't have to forget he's also just on foot and he's quite squishy when he fights against large entities, so he's not able to place one hit after another. So you get very good stats for that price, no question over here. But also Angrim Iron Fist is a very decent pick, and also a Rune Lord with all runes activated on his Anvil of Doom has the same price like the Grombrindal. So in my opinion, Grombrindal is not a competitive choice of all. So let's come to Torgrim Grudgebearer, the High King, and the High King sits on his throne, of course, and he's always on his throne, so it's not able to to deploy him on foot. Angrim is very well armored, so we have 120 like all Dawi Lords. He's a melee expert. He has quite good melee stats, 50 melee attack, causing magical attacks. Melee defense is 62, and the weapon strength is 450, what is also quite good. The amount of armor piercing is 170, also quite good. Overall, quite decent stats, but quite interesting is, as I said, he sits on his throne, so he's very steady Lord. He will not fly around, and has better stats than the Rune Lord. Then he has some good abilities like High King that will is constantly will increase your weapon damage and the charge bonus and the melee attack, and he's then immune to psychology also. And then we have the Great Book of Grudges, +9 melee attack constantly. So with his good stats, his good abilities, and his throne, he's a quite steady and competitive pick, and on the same price level like the Rune Lord on his Anvil of Doom. Of course, just without the runes, but overall I would say they are both on the same skill level in a competitive sense. So I like this part when he reads in his book, is there any grudge undone? So summing all together, all Dawi Lords are really strong, have really good stats, are very heavily armored, and also the runes are really important to provide support for your own troops. But as I said, just 2 lords are really steady. The other lords on foot have little problems to fight against large entities because they don't have the mass to do this. So they are not able to place one hit after another, and have problems to get in a fight against large monsters. And this is a little disadvantage. But let's continue with the heroes. So let's come to the Thane. The Thane is the strongest hero on the roster. Very good stats. He is very heavily armored, also 120. Bronze shield, very good melee attack, very good melee defense, very good weapon strength, good weapon strength. And the amount of armor piercing is okay. But the most important thing on the Thane is that he has an activated ability called Tormented Sword. And this is quite new. I'm pretty sure this wasn't there in the first game. It came with one update, or with Mortal Empires, I think. So if you activate Tormented Sword, enemies in a range of 30 meters cannot move anymore, and also the melee attack will reduce by 26. So this is a quite mighty ability, because you are now able to handle attacks from chariots or large monsters if you are nearby. So it's not able that chariots drive in and drive out and all that stuff. If you are nearby, if you activate this ability, they are stuck, they cannot move anymore, and then you can destroy them. So overall, very important for the Dawi to have such a ability, but as I said, you have to be very close to the target, so it's not always so easy. So let's come to the Runesmith, and the Runesmith is of course important because of his runes. He has the Rune of Odin's Steel, plus 30 armor, He has the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, damage competence in large numbers. He has the Rune of Negation, plus 22% damage resistance. And also he has the Master Rune of Growth One Eye, constantly plus 8 leadership. So these are very strong abilities. But the Runesmith is also quite good in melee combat. He has good melee stats. He's quite heavily armored. Melee attack, melee defense and weapon strength is good. The amount of armor piercing damage is quite low. But anyway, also in melee combat really useful. And overall a very important, very competitive pick is the Runesmith. So let's come to the Master Engineer. And the Master Engineer is a ballistic expert, missile specialist. In melee combat he's not very good, so the stats overall are quite low. Low melee attack, melee defense, weapon strength, everything quite low. So in melee combat he's not the best, even if he has some quite decent quite good armor piercing damage. But he has a gun also, he can shoot, so the missile damage of his gun is quite good. So we have 335, and also he has a quite good armor piercing missile damage of 180. But the most important thing on the Master Engineer are his abilities. One ability called Extra Powder, plus 10% explosion and plus 10% armor piercing explosion damage, so splash damage. The other ability called Ballistics Calibration, causing one unit missile infantry or artillery unit to have more accuracy, plus 30%, and better reload skills, plus 20. So also some other abilities, for example entrenchment will buff the armor piercing missile damage, and he has also a rune called the Rune of Slowness, will reduce the speed affect enemies in range with a speed reducement of 12%. So the Master Engineer provides support for your artillery or missile infantry, whatever, and he's quite a unique unit. There is no other unit in the game that has such abilities. And here's the little problem: everything sounds nice, but there is no need for more exploding damage or accuracy. The cannons, for example, are really accurate and already have good damage output. And the Master Engineer is quite weak in melee combat, even if his gun or his missile damage is quite good. But overall he's not worth the price and you can leave him out. So let's start with the infantry and let's begin with the miners. You can deploy one group of miners for 325 credits, the cheapest unit on the roster. They have good armor piercing values for that price, so we have an armor piercing damage of 17 and also a quite good amount of armor of 80 for that. For a low tier unit, quite high. But the other stats are therefore quite low, so we have very low melee attack and very low melee defense, just 18 over here, and also nearly no charge bonus and stuff like that. But overall they are really cost efficient for that price. But there's another unit available, the miners with blasting charges. These guys are a little bit more, I would say, cost efficient or more competitive, because you get these blasting charges for a little bit more money, and these blasting charges from the miners are really strong. Also, of course, there are also just a few salvos available, but overall they're causing a really good splash damage. So the splash damage is really important. It can disrupt enemy infantry lines, especially in the charge in the beginning, and this is really important. This is really strong, and as I said, this is the reason why the miners with blasting charges are more competitive, better choice than just the normal miners. The other stats are the same, so the miners with blasting charges have the same melee stats than the normal miners, so no difference over here, just the blasting charges. There is a regiment of renown available, the Acron miners with blasting charges, and they have more melee attack, melee defense, a little bit more charge bonus, but especially more missile damage was quite interesting, so more blasting charge damage. But overall I wouldn't say the Acron miners are worth the price, cause the extra charge is 200. Of course the stats are a little bit better, but it's not worth the price. I would always pick two groups of miners with blasting charges instead one group of Acron miners. In some cases, maybe if you just want one single group, you can pick the Acron miners, but I wouldn't recommend. I would always pick instead two normal groups of miners with blasting charges. So one or two groups of miners with blasting charges are always a competitive pick against every faction. And if you need a high quantity of units in your build, the normal miners are also quite good in some cases. Maybe against, if you predict to get outnumbered against maybe the Skavens or something like that, there's one or two builds with a huge amount of normal miners, and they can also be quite useful. Also worth to be mentioned is that you can deploy all miners in a vanguard position. So let's come to the Dwarf Warriors. The Dwarf Warriors are also quite cost efficient. They are armored and shielded. They have a quite good amount of armor for their price. So we have 84. They have a bronze shield. The melee attack is quite low. It's just 22. That is very low. But the melee defense is therefore quite high. So we have 40. The weapon strength is okay. And they are not a armor piercing unit, so the amount of armor piercing is quite low. But they have a charge defense against large foes. So overall, I would say they are designed to fight in the first row and the front line. They are a frontline unit because they have very good, very decent defense stats. And they are also shielded and overall quite cost efficient, as I said. But you have to remember nearly no melee attack and no armor piercing damage. So let's continue with the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. This is the armor piercing version. So we have an amount of armor piercing of 23, what is quite good. They're also very cost efficient. If you need a cheap armor piercing unit, the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons are really designed for that. They are also heavily armored, 85. Nothing more to say about that. A little bit less melee defense. Of course, they have a great weapon, no shield. So the melee defense is -10 regarding the melee defense of the normal Dwarf Warriors. So overall, as I said, if you need a cheap armor piercing unit, you can pick the Dwarf Warriors, also quite cost efficient. So let's get to the bigger guys, the Longbeards, and there's also a shielded version and a great weapon version. Let's begin with the shielded version. These guys have also charge defense against large foes. They are very heavily armored, so we have an amount of armor of 100. They have a bronze shield. The melee attack is quite low, but therefore the melee defense is nearly 50. This is a lot of stuff. The weapon strength is not the best, but also not bad, 32. As I said, they are no armor piercing units, so the armor piercing amount is quite low, but they are old grumblers, so they have this encourage ability. This unit provides a leadership bonus to nearby allies, and this is a quite important ability, like the aspiring champion from Chaos, really important. They are also immune to psychology. So the Longbeards are a really cost efficient unit. You get a lot of stuff for 650 credits. Of course the melee attack is quite low, the weapon strength is okay, and the armor piercing damage is not the highest. They are not a armor piercing unit, but therefore you get a lot of other stuff. They are good defense stats. They have charge defense against large foes. They have this encourage ability. They have they are immune to psychology, and they are very heavily armored. So overall very cost efficient. They are also a frontline unit, so you can put them directly in the front line. So if you don't need too much armor piercing damage, this is a very good unit. So let's come to the great weapon version. And these guys have less melee defense. Of course, they are not shielded. The weapon strength is a little bit higher, but overall, of course, the most important thing is that these guys causing a lot of armor piercing damage, 25 in fact. They have also charge defense. They are also old grumblers with this encourage ability, and they are also immune to psychology. So if you need a lot of armor piercing damage, this is your unit. Or let me say it like this, they are really cost efficient for 750 credits, and when you need a lot of armor piercing damage, they are must have in every build in my opinion, because you get a lot of units for that price, and they really pay off. A really good unit, really strong, nothing more to say about that. So there's also a regiment of renown available, the Grumbling Guard, and the Grumbling Guard is a combined unit between the shielded Longbeard version and the Great Weapon Longbeard version. In fact, they have the same amount of armor piercing like the Great Weapon version, and nearly the same amount of melee defense like the shielded version. In fact, a little bit more melee defense. So they have the advantages of both units combined to one. The Grumbling Guard is a great weapon, infantry, and the stats are quite similar to the Longbeards with great weapon, except for the melee defense, 52, as I said, a lot of stuff over here. They have Encourage ability, they are immune to psychology also, but they have an additional ability called the Old Grumblers that gives allied troops in range plus 9% Vigor. So if you are willing to pay the 250 credits extra charge, the Grumbling Guard can really pay off. So there is a regiment of renown for the Dwarf Warriors available, the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. This is an anti-infantry unit, armored and shielded. They have a charge bonus against large foes. They are quite good. They have a quite good amount of armor of 85. They have a bronze shield. They're causing flaming attacks, what is quite good. The melee defense is very high. We have 50. The weapon strength is not the highest, but therefore they have a bonus versus infantry of 6. So the weapon strength is in fact 28, and then plus 6 bonus versus infantry. The armor piercing is very low. The melee attack is also not the highest. So this is a quite this is a defense unit against other infantry units. And for 700 credits, these guys can really pay off. But as I said, it's quite strange that these guys have a charge defense against large foes, and on the other hand, they are just the anti-infantry unit. So I don't know. So you can put them in the front line. I think this is the case. This unit is a frontline unit because of the charge defense, but they should fight in melee combat just against infantry units. But as I said, for 700 credits, the price is quite good, and you get a lot of stuff for this. So if you fight against the enemy with a lot of infantry units, this unit can really pay off. But of course, just in matchups against light infantry, not so heavily armored infantry, because of the missing armor piercing damage. So let's come to the Slayers, and of course these guys are a anti-large unit. They are designed to fight enemy monsters. They are quite fast for a dwarf, that stands in the tooltips. So they have a speed of 40, so also some flankings are possible. They have a huge weapon strength of 48. This is a lot of stuff. Also the armor piercing amount is not low, so we have 16, that is okay. And then we have a bonus versus large of 24, and this is a lot of stuff. These guys causing a lot of damage to large units. They have also a triggered ability called the Death Blow. This will trigger when the hit points are lower than 20%, and that will give the Slayers a plus 15% armor piercing damage and plus 15% weapon damage. Very strong. The Slayers are also unbreakable. They will never rout off, so terror from large units does not trigger. And yeah, in every build against large units, these guys are a must-have. So there's also a regiment of renown version available, the Dragonback Slayers. And the Dragonback Slayers have a better melee attack of 50, so plus 12. The charge bonus is a little bit better, but overall they have better abilities, or more abilities. For example, they have a physical resistance of 20%. There's a lot of stuff. They have a charge defense against large, and this is just on the Dragonback Slayers. So on the normal Slayers don't have a charge defense against large. And they have also an ability called the Power of the Dragonback. And this gives these guys a plus 22% flame resistance. Quite interesting. And this is constantly. And the extra charge is 250 credits. So if you are willing to pay this, these guys can really pay off. But also the normal version pay off for 900 credits, so you can decide. You don't have to forget these guys are the strongest damage dealer unit in the game. Of course, the performance is superior just against large units, because the amount of armor is literally 0. The amount of melee defense is quite decent for a damage dealer unit, but anyway, these guys will also take a lot of damage from monsters. So, and of course they will also cause a lot of damage, but use them sensibly, cause yeah, they will die also quite fast in some cases. What I mean is, don't send these guys in a fight against armored infantry. That's not how they should be applied. So let's go to one of the most elite units on the roster, the Hammerers. And the Hammerers are declared as a damage dealer unit, and they're causing a tremendous amount of armor piercing damage. So they have a weapon strength in fact of 55, and the amount of armor piercing is 41. This is a lot of stuff. The melee defense is also quite decent, okay, 34. The melee attack is nearly 50. A lot of stuff over here. The armor is 100, so supreme stats overall. So nothing more to say about the Hammerers. These guys are designed to fight heavily armored infantry, high tier infantry. So if you play against the factions that typically bring a lot of high tier infantry with their builds, the Hammerers can really pay off. The price is 1100 credits, and this is quite cost efficient for that performance. So is a group of Longbeards not enough? Try it with some Hammerers. So there's a regiment of renown available, the Peak Gate Guard. And the Peak Gate Guard is in fact the strongest infantry unit of the complete game to this date. So they will take out a group of Chosen in a 1-on-1, Swordsmasters of Hoth, etc. So regarding the normal Hammerers, the Peak Gate Guard have better melee stats, so a better melee attack of +8. The melee defense is a lot better, +14. So we have a damage dealer unit with a melee defense of 50. So this is a lot of stuff over here. The Peak Gate Guard causing magical attacks and have this ability Armor Sundering, reduces the armor for 10 seconds by -30. So very interesting additional abilities over here regarding the melee attack, and also the Peak Gate Guard is immune to psychology. So incredible strong stats, but also incredible high price. So we have 1500 credits, and for that price you get also 2 groups of Longbeards with great weapons. So I'm a fan of this unit, but I also see that in the most cases they are too expensive, so just in a few matchups maybe worth it. So let's come to the Ironbreakers, the unit with by far the best defense stats overall. So we have a melee defense of 68, nearly 70, incredible high. We have an amount of armor of 125, very high. We have a bronze shield, and we have these blasting charges also. So these guys are a frontline unit and designed to hold the line for a very long time, against everything, you can say. They have a charge defense against all also in addition, but therefore the disadvantage is that damage output is quite low. So we have a relatively spoken low weapon strength of 32. The armor piercing amount is also very low, so just 10. The melee attack is 30, so everything quite low, so the damage output is very low. But if you need a steady frontline unit that is able to hold the line for a very long time, really steady, leadership is 85, you can deploy one group of Ironbreakers for 1200 credits, but I would prefer damage instead of defense. So the Hammerers are preferable in this case, I would say, but of course in some cases maybe one group of Ironbreakers is worth the price. So there's also a regiment of renown available, the Norgrimlings Ironbreakers, and I mean, give me a break. These guys have nearly 1500 crit points more. The melee defense is +14. I mean, look at that. 82 melee defense overall. This is incredible. The melee attack is +10, so we're 40 over here. So these stats are incredible high. The Norgrimlings Ironbreakers are also able to deploy in a vanguard position, and they are immune to psychology. We have here the same price like the Peak Gate Guard, 1500 credits, and here's the problem. 1500 credits is a lot of stuff. Of course you get incredible stats for that, but it's still just one unit. And this is the problem overall with all infantry units in this price area. You have just one unit, and it's very easy for some opponents to snipe that out with rear charges, with magic, with all that stuff. This unit is the focus of your opponent and should be surrounded by your own units. And here's the next problem: because you spend so much money on one unit, you are not able to bring a huge amount of other units, with your army. And this limits your ability to use different tactics. So the Norgrimling's Ironbreakers have still very bad damage stats. So the melee attack is 40, that is quite low for that price. The weapon strength is 32, very low. The amount of armor piercing is 10, very low. So the damage output is quite useless, and this is the little problem. You spend so much money on a unit without any damage output or with a very low damage output, and this is a problem and never worth the price. And as I said before, damage is preferable to defense. So if you want to spend so much money, take a group of hammerers. The Norgrimling's Ironbreakers are never worth the price. You can leave them out completely. So summing all together, the Dawi infantry is the core of the complete army. Everything very elite, very cost efficient, and the most important arm of service. So let's start with the missile infantry. Let's begin with the rangers, and there are different types of rangers available, different types of units, but let's start with the usual one, or with the normal one. These guys are able, you can deploy them in a vanguard position. They have stalk, quite interesting, so they are hidden, and they are quite fast. So everything tells you this is for some tactics, for some sneak attacks, all that stuff. And also the stats are quite good for that price. So we have a missile range of 160, what is quite good. The missile damage is 21, what is also quite good. The armor piercing amount is low, so this is not very high. But even the melee combat stats are not really bad for that price. So of course we have a melee attack of just 18, that is not really high, but the melee defense is 26 and the weapon strength 28. So overall, for that price, really cost efficient. You can deploy one group for 500 credits, and for this amount of credits, these guys are really worth the price. So let's come to the Bookman's Rangers. Also able to, you can deploy them in the vanguard position, also stalk. They are fast and quite interesting. Over here they have a charge defense against large foes. So the stats are overall much better than the stats of the Rangers. So we have more hit points, more leadership, more melee attack, more melee defense. So much more melee defense, plus 12. So the melee stats are overall quite decent now. So you can let them fight in melee combat. And as I said, the stats are quite good for a missile infantry unit. Of course, don't expect any wonders in melee combat, because these guys have nearly no armor. And the melee stats are not, they are quite decent, but not the best. But they are really able to hold the life for some time against some mid-range or low-tier units. So this is quite decent over here. The missile damage is also a little bit better, but quite interesting is, as I said before, they have a charge defense against large foes. They are immune to psychology, very interesting. And they have an additional ability called the Liquid Fortification that replenishes hit points of combatants, so constantly regeneration. And this is a lot of stuff what you get for your money over here. So you can deploy one group for 750 credits, of course 250 more than the normal Rangers. But even though, I would say these guys are quite cost efficient, and as I said, you get a lot of stuff for your money. So let's come to the Rangers with great weapons, and these guys causing armor piercing melee combat damage. But much more important is the fact that these guys causing armor piercing missile damage. It's not shown on the tooltips, and that's in my opinion really important. The other stats are regarding the stats of the normal Rangers, not on each point better. So we have a better weapon strength and the armor piercing melee combat damage, but it's not really necessary in my opinion to have a missile infantry unit causing armor piercing melee combat damage. As I said, much more important is the armor piercing missile damage, but the range of their missiles is very low, so just the half of the range of the normal Rangers, 75. So they have to be really close to their target. These guys, the price for these guys is also not really high, so 650 credits. But it's not worth it. As I said, armor piercing melee combat damage is not really necessary, and the missing range or the very low range is also not really good, so you can leave them out in my opinion. So let's come to the Ulthas Raiders, the regiment of renown of the Rangers with great weapons. These guys have a little bit better melee attack, melee defense, but not significant. The missile damage is higher, but the armor-piercing missile damage is the same overall, so it's not worth the price. So of course the extra charge is not really high, so plus 100, 750 overall. But as I said, I'm not a fan of Rangers with great weapons, because in my opinion their armor-piercing melee combat damage is not necessary. The Ulthas Raiders have an additional ability called Marked by Ultha. This will reduce some missile resistance and armor from my unit, but also not worth the price. So in my opinion you can leave the Ulthas Raiders out completely. So let's come to the Quarrelers. It's not so easy for me to pronounce it, but anyway, these guys are a alternative to the Rangers. For 50 more credits you get a little bit more hit points, leadership, melee defense, and so on. But the most important point is the armor. So you get a lot more armor, plus 40 over here. This is a lot of stuff. So they have an amount of armor of 80, very heavily armored for a missile infantry unit. The disadvantage is that they have a little bit slower. You are also not able to deploy them in a vanguard position. And yeah, this is also, they are not hidden. They have they don't have stalk. So overall I would say you can leave out the crawlers completely. Take a normal group of Rangers. It's not worth the price, even if the extra charge is not really high, just because the higher amount of armor means that they are able to stay longer in melee combat, but that's not worth it. As I said, the missing vanguard deployment and stalk ability is also not very good, so you can leave these guys out completely. So there's also a great weapon version of the crawlers available, and if we compare the crawlers with great weapons to the Rangers with great weapons, we can see that the crawlers have also here more hit points, more armor, so amount of armor of 80, more ammunition, and the missile range is still very high, so we have 160. And as I said before, the missile range of the Rangers with great weapon is quite low, so 75. So overall, if you want a group of missile infantry with great weapons, I would pick the crawlers instead of the Rangers, because as I said, the missile range is still very high. And also they are a little bit cheaper, so the price is 600 credits, even if the vanguard deployment and the stock ability is also missing over here. But yeah, I would pick them instead of the Rangers. But overall, as I said, I'm not a fan of missile infantry with great weapons, so I would leave out everything with great weapons on missile infantry completely. So let's come to the more interesting stuff, the Thunderers. And the Thunderers are really important, especially, of course, they're causing a lot of armor-piercing missile damage. And this is really important to snipe out enemy lord, monsters, and so on. The price is 700 credits, but they are worth the price. They are in fact better than the handgunners from the Empire. Of course, the handgunners from Empire are a little bit cheaper, but overall this is the better unit, causing more damage. The melee stats overall, of course, not really good, so they are not designed to fight in melee combat, even if they will hold the line for some time. So overall, I would say they are the most important missile infantry unit on the roster, because the damage output is quite important, especially when it comes to fights against large entities. They will slice and dice large units in their range, and this is very important for the Dawi, because they are an additional tool to handle everything against large units or large entities. And yeah, they are worth the price, and nothing more to say about that. Really competitive pick. So let's come to the Iron Drakes, and the Iron Drakes, they are very heavily armored, so we have an amount of armor of 125, but this information is quite useless, because these guys are bad in melee combat. You can forget this completely, so the amount of armor is also not interesting. What much more interesting is the fact that these guys cause a tremendous amount of damage. So we have a damage overall of 163. They have a burnt ability that will reduce the leadership by -8, of course causing flaming attacks, exploding armor piercing damage, splash damage, and the armor piercing missile damage is quite low. It's just 4, but overall, in fact, in reality, they perform really good against everything. Every one of you know it doesn't matter if it is a large entity, if it is a infantry or cavalry unit, these guys will burn everything away. So this is the damage is very high. But the problem is, of course, that these guys yeah, they are very vulnerable, so they have to be really close to their target, so the range is just 80, and this is very low. So overall, these guys are really vulnerable and very easy to snipe out, so they are not a competitive pick even if the damage output is really high. So also quite interesting is the fact that these guys have a fire resistance of 70%, but it's also quite useless. It doesn't matter really. The magic resistance is 35%, so it's higher than on other units. But as I said, even though also the price is 700 credits, so they are not so cheap, because you don't have to forget it's just 21 units in the group. So overall, I would leave them out completely, because it's not so easy to handle it. They need a lot of micromanagement, and it's very easy for enemies to snipe them out, because your opponent will notice quite fast where the fire comes from, and then they are the first target, and yeah, as I said, unfortunately don't worth the price. So there's also a regiment of renown unit available, the Scolder Guard, and these guys have better melee stats, but you can leave this out completely. These guys are not designed to fight in melee combat. They have a better range, so overall 90. The missile damage is much lower, so -64. They have a physical resistance, but the other interesting fact is these guys don't shoot with fire, it's with steam, so they have not the flaming attacks and also not the burnt ability. But therefore these guys have a greater amount or much higher amount of armor piercing missile damage. So they are also declared as an armor piercing missile damage anti-infantry unit. But the extra charge is 350, so these guys are never worth the price in no scenario. So let's come to the Iron Drakes with Troll Hammer Torpedo. And these guys are designed to fight large units. In fact, they have an anti-large bonus of 24, and this is quite interesting because this is a lot of stuff. Their missile damage is overall 88 plus 24, and this is a lot of stuff. They have also just 21 units in the group. As you can see, the fire rate is quite low. But against large units, in some cases, it's quite interesting. The problem is that these guys have a quite decent price, so 900. So I wouldn't pick them, in my opinion. The armor is amount of armor is 125, but also here these guys are also not designed to fight in melee combat. The range is also a great problem because the range is just 90. You have to be really close to the target you will like to shoot on. Of course, but as I said, of course the damage output is really good, especially against large units, but unfortunately the price is really high. They're also just 21 units, so you can leave these guys also out. They are not worth the price and really not a competitive pick. Sorry. So summing all together, the missile infantry is a strong part of the Dawi, but by far not every unit is a competitive pick. Of course, some Thunderers or Rangers can provide a quite decent support for your army, especially because of the lack of mobility of the Dawi. I personally played always without any missile infantry at all, but that's just my personal type of gameplay. The performance and the use of the missile infantry depends really strong on the type of gameplay or tactic you want to use. So in my type of gameplay, the missile infantry were not so important, but in others it's a very important factor, so it depends very strong. But anyway, let's directly go to the war machines. So let's begin with the war machines, and let's start with the gyrocopters. And the normal gyrocopters are a anti-infantry unit. They are very well armored. The amount of armor is 100. The speed is also quite good, 105. But of course, they are not the fastest flying unit in the game. So be aware, other flying units can chase these gyrocopters quite well. They are also quite, can say quite steady or damage. They are damage dealer war machine in melee combat. You can say the melee attack is 30. Of course, there's nearly no melee defense. Therefore, the weapon strength is quite high, 66, and armor piercing amount is 16, what is also not bad. So if you run out of ammunition, these guys can have a good damage output also in melee combat. But overall, the missile damage is 76, and the amount of armor piercing is 4. They're causing a splash damage, so the explosive base damage is 37, and the explosive armor piercing damage is 8. These guys, as I said, are well designed for fighting enemy infantry, especially in the pre-combat for some harass damage, but also during the fight. If they constantly shoot on enemy infantry, they can kill a lot of models. So in my opinion, from all gyrocopters, is this gyrocopter with the steam gun the most competitive pick. Also worth to be mentioned are the gyrocopter bombs, in this case with 2 loads. Of course, you need a little bit micromanagement, but they are very well for damaging enemy infantry units, especially when they are engaged in melee combat. But be careful that you're not hitting your own troops. So you can deploy one group for 700 credits, but also be aware over here you get only 3 models. And also be aware that other flying units can take out gyrocopters quite fast. So gyrocopters are really not always useful. So let's continue with the gyrocopters with the brimstone gun. And these machines are the equivalent to the gyrocopters with the steam gun, because these machines are anti-large. The other stats are quite similar, so a little bit more hit points, leadership, missile range. A general problem of the gyrocopters overall are the very low missile range. So we have a missile range on the steam gun version of 75, but it's very low. You have to be really close to your target. Here with the brimstone gun it's 100, but even though it's quite low. A quite interesting fact is that these gyrocopters with brimstone gun are declared as an anti-large unit, but they don't have an anti-large bonus. But therefore they have a very high amount of armor piercing missile damage of 74. The splash damage is also missing, so that tells you these guys are designed to shoot on large entities. But overall, the gyrocopters with brimstone gun are not really efficient. The damage output is in reality quite low. Also, you have a price of 800 credits, in my opinion quite expensive for just 3 units. As I said, the gyrocopters are overall quite vulnerable, and especially the damage output against heavily armored targets is very low, so you can leave these war machines out completely, take a normal cannon, and But also worth to be mentioned is that these machines have also 2 loads of gyro bombs. So let's come to the gyro bombers, and we have 2 models, the normal gyro bomber and the regiment of renown, the Skyhammer. So like the name, the gyro bombers have a huge damage output, especially with their bombs. So these machines are declared as anti-infantry unit. Of course, they are designed for bombing enemy infantry. They have a huge damage output. The missile damage is 1100, and they have also a gun also. Quite interesting fact is that they are able to fire whilst moving. The Skyhammer has more missile damage, plus 137, but much more interesting is the improved bombing ability. He's able to throw several bombs at once. But overall you can say the gyro bombers are quite, I wouldn't say useless, but they are never a competitive pick. For fun purposes, but not for winning games, because these guys are very expensive. The normal gyro bombers, the price is 1150 credits, and the Skyhammer is incredibly expensive, 1400 credits, so they are never worth the price. And be aware, you need a lot of micromanagement, and this will distract you from more important things, so you can leave out the gyro bombers, in my opinion, completely. And also the gyro bombers are much slower than the gyrocopters, who have a speed of 90. So they are very, very slow and a very easy target for enemy flying units. So overall, maybe you already heard it, I'm not a fan of gyrocopters, even if they are giving you some mobility back. They are very vulnerable, they are not the fastest flying units, and the damage output is also not the best. So in some cases, gyrocopters can be quite useful, especially in the pre-combat when it comes to harass damage. But I don't know one single tactic where the gyrocopters are a elementary part. It's always for harass damage or supporting your own troops. But for that, in my opinion, they are quite expensive. You get only 3 models with the normal gyrocopters and only 1 with the gyro bombers. And as I said, they are very vulnerable to enemy flying units, and then it's a high risk to take them to the battlefield in some matchups. And also for the bombs you need a lot of micromanagement, so there are a lot of disadvantages. But also, of course, in some cases, as I said, they are quite useful to do some harass damage in the pre-combat, especially the steam gun version of the gyrocopters. So, okay, let's come to the last part of the army roster. Let's talk about the artillery. So let's start with the bolt thrower, and the bolt thrower is quite cheap, so you can deploy one group for 550 credits and you get 3 models. The bolt thrower causing armor piercing missile damage and has an anti-large bonus of 30, what is quite good. I think the stats improved since Mortal Empires, because I think I'm pretty sure that the bolt thrower was in the first game quite useless. Even though the cannon is always preferable over the bolt thrower, because the cannon has the higher missile range and also a higher damage output, especially when it comes to armor piercing missile damage. The cannon has the double armor piercing missile damage of the bolt thrower, even if the cannon has not this bonus versus large. So the cannon is always preferable, even if the cannon is more expensive. So let's continue with the grudge thrower, and the grudge thrower is a really important unit. He's an anti-infantry unit. He has a quite good damage output, so we have also a very good armor piercing missile damage, splash damage, everything very good stats. But the most important part is the missile range, so we have 440. So the grudge thrower is always in range, in firing range, from the start on in the most cases. So this is a very important unit, especially for sniping out high tier infantry or also missile infantry, because as I said, it's that we have a lack of mobility, and so it's very important to have a tool to snipe out enemy archers and stuff like that, because you don't have cavalry and all that stuff, and the grudge thrower is a tool to do this. But of course we have a regiment of renown available, the Goblobber, and the Goblobber is, even if the extra charge is 200, preferable to the grudge thrower. But if you need an additional grudge thrower, you can take this one for 700 credits. So the Goblobber has a special ability. He has this discourage ability. He's throwing goblins. So this discourage ability will reduce the leadership by -16, and this is a lot of stuff. So if you will hit a enemy infantry unit or any unit, whatever, the leadership will reduce, and this is very, very, very strong, especially against faction with a lot of low tier units. A lot of units will rout off quite fast in the pre-combat also, so this is a very strong ability, and this is the reason why the Goblobber is always preferable. But also the missile damage is better on the Goblobber, so we have a improvement of the missile damage of +33, and this is also quite good. So we have nearly 200 missile damage, and this is the reason why the Goblobber is always preferable over the grudge thrower, even if the extra charge is 200. But of course, if you need another anti-infantry artillery unit, you can take also an additional grudge thrower. But yeah, nothing more to say about that. The Goblobber is a very mighty artillery unit. So let's go to the cannon, and the cannon is with the Goblobber, the most important artillery unit of the Dawi. The cannon is a anti-large artillery. Even if the cannon has no real anti-large bonus, the armor-piercing missile damage is huge. We have 336, and this is a lot of stuff. The range is also supreme. We have 440, so the cannon is in the most cases always in range. Also, the accuracy of the cannon is really good. So the cannon is the best and most important tool for the Dawi to fight large monsters or large entities like lords, flying units, and especially when it comes to the fight against chariots. The cannons are the best tool of the Dawi to take out chariots, especially in the pre-combat. The cannons have a very high accuracy. As I said, the range is really high, the missile damage is high, though this is the best tool to take out chariots in the pre-combat. So if you have problems with chariots, take 1 or 2 groups of cannons, and this is the best tool. So nothing more to say about that. I played in every of my builds with cannons. The cannons are really important. Of course, you have to protect your cannons. So they are not cost efficient if they will die really fast in the game. So you have to protect it really well. But then they can really pay off. So let's go to the organ gun, and the organ gun is overall quite expensive. So we have a price of 1100 credits, and this is a lot of stuff. The organ gun causing armor piercing missile damage. The problem of the organ gun is the very low missile range. So we have just 300, and this is even lower than the missile range of the bolt thrower. But therefore the missile damage is very high. So we have a 334 missile damage. The amount of armor-piercing missile damage is 68. And the organ gun is a hybrid artillery, I would say. So it's designed to shoot on infantry and, in my opinion, also on large entities. But overall, the organ gun is not a competitive pick because the cannon is much better, and also, I mean, even the bolt thrower is, in my opinion, a better pick. The organ gun can cause a tremendous amount of damage, but it has to be in range, and in some cases, in my opinion, there's always some little problems with the accuracy, because the organ gun always shoots just on one target. So if you shoot on one group of infantry, you will shoot always just in the middle, so the damage does not spread. So in my opinion, not worth the price, because it's also very expensive, as I said. So last but not least, the flame cannon. The flame cannon is very expensive. We have 1250 credits. The flame cannon is a anti-infantry unit causing burnt damage, so the leadership will reduce by 8. Also flaming attacks, of course, the damage overall is tremendous, so we have 373. Also the splash damage of 70 and armor piercing damage of 75. So the stats of the damage output is very high, but therefore the range is so low. So we have just a range of 230, and this is very low, and this is the most, this is a problem of the flame cannon. So they have really close to their target, and for this price it's not really efficient, so you can leave them out. If they probably are going to increase the range in the future, maybe then, but actually it's not worth the price. So summing all together, the Dawi artillery is a very important arm of service to compensate the lack of mobility. As I said before, nothing more to say about that. This is really important. Of course, the performance will always depend on the terrain, as always with artillery. But even though the Dawi artillery should be always included in builds, in my opinion, as I said, I always played with artillery in my builds. So that was everything for the army roster, and let's continue with tactics and some gameplay footage. So let's start with the tactics, with some gameplay footage. And first of all, I would like to say that their amount of different good working tactics is quite limited for the Dawi. This is because I already mentioned the lack of mobility, and also, as I said, important arms of service are missing. So there are, in my opinion, just 2 or 3 really good working tactics available for the Dawi. So let's begin with the deployment, and I love to deploy my units in a box formation, so all sides are well protected. So on the front line, always with units that have charge defense against large foes. So you can ensure that your front line is quite steady, and your front line is negotiate the charge damage from large units, from cavalry, from monsters, and so on. And also on the sides, on the left flank and on the right flank, I would always put units with charge defense for charge-ins from the side. Directly behind the front line, I would always stand some miners with blasting charges, so they can directly throw their blasting charges to enemy infantry units. But you have to be careful. In the most cases, enemy opponents also send directly their monsters in the front line, so all the blasting charges are hitting the enemy lord or something like that. So you have to be careful over there that the blasting charges only hit enemy infantry. So in the last line, always the cannons, of course. Behind the cannons I have always my slayers, so enemy flying lords or something like that are always like to fly in the cannons or destroy the cannons in the pre-combat, or harass units, so that slayers can react almost immediately. And this is the reason why I have my slayers in the last line, and also they can defend the backside from enemy cavalry and stuff like that.
Aye, as ye command.
So if it is possible, I would always march towards my enemy and leave my cannons alone. Of course, not completely alone. You can see over here a group of slayers are protecting the cannons, so always leave a group, in the best case, a group of slayers to protect the cannons. But always march forward. You can see it like here, march against your enemy if it is possible, and leave your cannons alone. And this is for a reason. You ensure with this tactic that your cannons are always online, not blocked or something like that, and you also don't hit too much of your own troops, and it ensures that you have a free firing field, so your cannons can shoot the complete game, and always online, always shooting, always working. And don't panic, it's not so easy for your opponent to send you also a separated group of cannons offline very fast if they are protected from slayers or other units. Especially slayers are really designed to protect cannons, because they can deal with all flying, all large units, flying units, all that stuff. Really a round unit. And as I said, don't panic. Your opponent has also to dispatch a lot of units to attack your cannons, so it's not so easy for your opponent to send them offline, even if they are separated from your main army. But as I said, it's not possible in all cases. You can see it in this replay over here. In this replay, my complete army is together, or in this battle, so it's not always possible, and it's not always the best choice. But in some cases, I would say it's perfect if it is possible, because the cannons, you can use the cannons in the most efficient way if you leave them alone. The cannons are in this tactic, or in my type of gameplay, the most important tool, I would say. You can see it like here. It's very important to outrange enemy artillery, because you have a problem if you don't have any cannons and your opponent has artillery. You have a big problem, because if you are playing Dawi and you have to march, you cannot turtle, then you have to walk towards your enemy. You have a problem, because you will lose a lot of units and you are under pressure. If you have cannons, you can see in this example over here, in a few seconds this hell cannon is offline, no problem. Very important also, if you see that your enemy would like to flank you, you can see it like here, close the flanks, make sure that your units are also here, that your units are standing directly towards the enemy to negotiate the charge damage of chariots, cavalry and so on. So put them in the right position on the flanks also. And of course, The runes are a very important part. You can see it over here. Activate the runes if your units are engaged in a fight. Make sure that the most units possible are within this range of the runes, so all your units get a buff, and this is very strong. This, as I said, this can make really a difference between victory or defeat. Now you see here my slayers. I dispatched my slayers. I saw my opponent don't want to attack my cannons. Now I dispatched my slayers as I saw that all of his large units are engaged in the fight, and now I join the fight with my slayers because I need them in the front line and attack the Kolek, of course. So in the most cases it is better to deploy a little bit thicker with your units, so not so thin, so you can they are able to negotiate the charge damage much better. But if you see your opponent outnumber you by far, you can deploy it in a very thin and long formation on this side. The problem over here is that if you have a wide front line, a very thin formation, then not all units are always within the range of the runes. Not only with the Dawi, but also here with the Dawi. If you see that all your opponent's units are engaged in a frontline fight, you can see my Longbeard unit on the left side are sneaking behind the left flank. And if you see that all units are engaged in a fight, sneak behind the front line and attack them from behind. As I said, this is not a Dawi tactic, it's just on every faction the same, but it's also possible with Dawi units, of course, even if they are quite slow, relatively spoken. So very, very important is the fact, if you see chariots, this is the first target for the artillery. Nothing else. Chariots, shoot on the chariots. The first target, always. If there is artillery, of course this is the second target, and also cavalry. Everything that has a lot of mobility and the Dawi have problems with, this is your target. Then you can shoot on lords and all that stuff. But the first targets are the chariots, then artillery, and then enemy cavalry. So this is very important, because I saw a lot of mistakes from my opponents if I played in the past with Chaos, that they're not focusing my chariots, they're shooting on my Kolek and all that stuff. This is wrong. Always the first target are the chariots, so they cannot overrun you. Of course, always try to dodge some spells from your opponent. The Dawi are not very mobile, they're very slow, it's very difficult, so it's very easy for opponents to cast a lot of stuff in your build, especially when you stand really tiny. So be very careful. Your opponents will cast with their spellcaster a lot of stuff in your army, and try to dodge this, and try to don't stand too tiny together that not every unit is affected by enemy spells. Use the rune of Rough and Ruin always just on infantry units, of course. They will get a lot of damage from that. Make always sure that all runes are, that there is always a cooldown. Always use the runes immediately if it is possible, and if you're of course standing in range of your own units, but then activate always the runes immediately. Don't waste time, and there should be always a cooldown on your Rune Lord or Runesmith. Also very, very important is, you can see it in this example over here, my opponent always tried to dodge the attacks of my slayers with his Kolek. He tries to run behind his front line, that my slayers get engaged in a fight with his infantry. Always be careful, because you will lose all your slayers very fast if you don't watch after them. You can see he comes always in with the Kolek. I send them my slayers, he will walk out, and this is you can see that. And this, you have to be very careful that your slayers are not engaged in a fight against armored infantry. Also worth to be mentioned is that you can use the Rune of Wrath and Ruin also on light cavalry, so in some cases also they are quite useful. You can see the most important thing is, in my opinion, that your cannons, if you have two groups of cannons with your build, they have to be online all the time. You can see my cannons are still online, still shooting, all my runes are active, and this is that is perfect. So always try to save or to protect your cannons. It's very important to do that, because you can see how much damage the cannons are always, you can see now, shooting on the Kolek, and they are the complete time they are online. My opponent gets so much damage from the cannons, so it's very important that your cannons are online all the time.
It is an order! Vengeance! Yes! Killers! Yes! That'll do! Alea's pressing on us! Fine! With axe! Be it ready! Vengeance! Vengeance! Pursue! Killers! Pursue! Kill! Bending! No! Pursue! Warriors! Yes!
You can see the cannons are a huge advantage, especially when it comes that you would like to finish off faster units like this Kolek or cavalry. So you're not able to chase them away because your units are so slow. So you have to work with the cannons to fight off routing units, or also faster units. They will run away if they are low on armor or low on hit points, and then you finish them with the cannons. It's always like this in a death ball, because Dawi is the strongest faction in a death ball combat and have the strongest infantry of all. But of course don't blob or create any death ball, because it's also very easy for your opponent to cast with some spellcaster spells in it, and so you will get a lot of damage from that and you can lose the game because of this. But in the late game, in the most cases, if your opponent is completely engaged in a fight with your infantry units and you have a lot of stuff left, you will win the game. So very important also over here, there's never a time where you can lean back and say, okay, my units are fighting, I don't do anything. It's especially with Dawi very dangerous, especially for beginners. They think, okay, all my units are engaged in a fight, that's fine, but it isn't like this. In some cases it seems like that your units are engaged in a fight, but they don't do anything. So always ensure that they are engaged, click on them and give them an attack command. So it sounds very easy, but it's not so easy, I know. In reality it's a lot of work, but it's really important and can make a difference. Be cool if your opponent has a lot of harass units. I won so many games in which my opponent brought a lot of harass units, because most players think Dawi has no mobility, so I bring a lot of harass units, then I win, because he cannot chase me away. But in the most cases, especially missile cavalry has so weak armor piercing values that you can really wait till they run out of ammunition. And especially the Rune Lord has his rune that gives your units plus 20% missile resistance. You can also use that. So don't panic, don't run behind enemy harass units, stand your ground and wait till they run out of ammunition. Shoot on them with your cavalry. Also with a Rune of Wrath and Ruin is always quite useful against light cavalry, or this works always quite well. Dawi is overall very steady, so also don't panic if your opponent has a lot of cavalry units with rear charges. The leadership is not dropping very fast, so they are overall quite steady, but of course ensure that your front line is healthy and they are not get attacked from behind. Also, it's not the end if your lord drops, because of course it's not an advantage, it's bad, but you can still win the game. Dawi infantry is steady even if the lord dies in some cases. Also over here I would like to show you this. There's also other tactics available. This tactic, for example, you have a lot of thunderers and you deploy weak infantry or low tier infantry like miners or dwarf warriors in a very spreaded formation, so everything completely over the complete battlefield. Then you take your thunderers and they do the same. So it's very difficult then for your opponent to decide on which side he should attack, and he will get fired, or he will take fire from all sides. And of course also in this build over here I have 2 cannons, so he will take a lot of fire. You cannot win this fight just with the strength of your infantry, of course, but therefore you have a lot of units, and especially a lot of missile infantry units and cannons. And in most cases, in some cases, this is also a quite good tactic. I never played it like this, but I know this tactic, and yeah, just for your information, this is a quite good tactic because your opponent cannot attack every unit over here. But as I said, there are a lot of different builds available, variation builds, because as I said, the infantry overall has a quite good variation. You can see it over here. 2 groups of miners with blasting charges, 4 groups of dwarf warriors with charge defense against large foes, 3 groups of longbeards with great weapons, 2 groups of slayers, then 2 groups of hammerers and 2 groups of cannons. This is a very strong build, a very all-round build, I would say, and yeah, I would like to show you this also. And as I already said, always make sure that your sides are protected, react to your opponent's movements, and yeah, protect your sides, protect your flanks, move forward if it is possible. But yeah, let's come to the summary. So summing all together, Dawi is a really, in my opinion, underrated faction. Even if the tactics are really, they are quite limited, and the things you can do, but you can also still bring a lot of variation in your builds. And all units, or nearly all units, are really steady, strong, very good AP values, very good armor values. So so nothing more to say about that. Of course there are also a lot of weaknesses, I know, but this is the faction with the second most games overall I've made, and I can tell you, you can also have a lot of success with these guys. But yeah, that's it. We are done. Thank you for watching. I know it's a lot of stuff, but I love to go in every detail. You see it. Yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you see any mistakes, any suggestions, also write it down in the comments. As I always say, thank you for all your support, for your that you tune in and all that stuff. Thank you, and I hope I see you on the next faction guide. So yeah, nothing more to say about here. Thank you. Have a nice evening and see you next time.